Welcome to the Tabletop Empire. My name is Nate, and today we will be covering skills in Star Wars RPG. What each skill is, what they're used for, and some examples of how you can interpret the dice when they come up in play. And at the very end, I'm going to give you a skills-related tip that can take your role-playing to the next level. This video is part of my Star Wars RPG Beginner's Guide series, where I go through the entire cool rulebook, chapter by chapter, explaining everything, breaking all the rules down to make it as easy as possible for you and your friends to just start playing. As you may remember from our dice video earlier in the series, skills work hand in hand with the dice as the skills determine what dice you actually end up rolling. But today we're going to go through all the skills and everything that they encompass, so that way the GMs, you know what to tell the players to roll in certain situations, and PCs, you know what to spend your XP on when you want to level up your skills. Skills in this game are broken into three categories: general skills, combat skills, and knowledge skills. General skills and combat skills are going to be based on the actions your character takes, what you want to do, whereas knowledge skills are based on what your character knows, which can be useful for gaining insights or information for specific situations. Let's start with the general skills. Astrogation is a character skill for space navigation. You will use this skill when plotting courses in your ship's navicomputer and when calculating jumps from system to system. If the party was lost in an unknown system, you could also use Astrogation to try to find where you are using the navicomputer. This skill can also be used if you want to go to a specific planet and you want to see if you know what sector it's in or how far it is from your current location. Astrogation can also be used to know what kind of spacecraft frequent various hyperlanes and space routes. For the difficulty, let's say the player is trying to calculate a jump to hyperspace along a well-established route. Then this would be an easy check. Difficulty would then increase based on other factors, such as the accuracy of the navigational information available, though we will go more in detail over ship travel stuff later in this series. Extra success could be used to calculate the jump to hyperspace faster. Let's say you're in a rush because you're in a space fight. Or maybe extra success could be used to arrive in orbit to the planet you're trying to get to. Advantage in threat could be used to make the travel time longer or faster, or maybe used to conserve fuel or burn fuel faster. Triumphs could mean safe passage, while despairs could mean that some disastrous occurrence happens, or maybe they just arrive at the wrong destination. Athletics is going to be your character's ability to run long distances, jump or climb over things, swimming in difficult conditions, and so on and so forth. Additional success could mean that the player finishes the task faster, or maybe arrives sooner, or maybe covers a larger distance with that check. Advantage could be helping your party members, which mechanically could look like passing them boost die. Smaller amounts of threat could mean that you inflict strain, whereas larger amounts of threat could mean that you inflict wounds. Triumph could be used to make the character succeed to a greater effect. Maybe you just don't move the boulder out of the way, but you also manage to push it behind you as well, blocking off any pursuers. While despair could be used to give a critical injury to the player. Charm is used when your character is flattering, flirting, or appealing to one's better nature. Difficulty for charm will come from whoever is being charmed's cool skill in an opposed check. So if the character being targeted would roll 2 greens and a yellow for cool, the player would roll their charm against 2 purples and a red. If the party is trying to charm a group, the GM will set the difficulty based on the group's overall disposition and how likely they are to respond to the appeal. Extra success may extend support into the following scenes, while advantage and threat might affect other subjects around the original target. Triumphs could create a permanent ally for the party. Not a member of the crew, but somebody that's always helpful whenever they're around. While despair, on the other hand, could turn them into a minor recurring adversary. There's one really important thing to keep in mind with charm, though. If the character tries to charm with a lie, that'll fall under deception instead. Coercion is when a player tries to get their way using fear, threats, and intimidation, with or without being accompanied by physical or hostile actions. This could also apply to questioning anyone being held captive. Difficulty will be determined by the targeted character's discipline in an opposed check. Coercion versus their discipline. Extra success could maybe inflict strain on the target or reveal more information. Advantage and threats could be used to affect nearby bystanders either positively or negatively, or maybe add boost or setback to future checks. Triumphs could break the target's will entirely, while despairs could cause the player to reveal some information to the NPC that they don't want the NPC to know, possibly causing some issues later down the line for the party. Computers is your character's ability with computers. Shocking, I know. This skill could be used to break into an enemy computer's terminal, search records in a database or on the HoloNet, investigate another slicer's actions, alter a droid's programming, or recover lost or damaged data, etc. Difficulty could be determined by whatever security measures, defenses, or encryptions the system has in place. Additional success could reduce the amount of time it takes to do the action. Advantage might uncover some extra information, while threat might alert the enemy to the presence of somebody breaking into a certain terminal. A triumph could completely conceal the player's activity in the system, while despair could leave some pretty vital information of the player behind for the enemy to find. Cool is your ability to externally remain calm under pressure. It is used to counter charm and negotiation in opposed checks. Cool is also used for initiative when your character is expecting or ready for a fight. In addition, Cool as well as Discipline can be used to heal some strain after combat encounters, where every success heals 1 strain. Don't worry, we'll cover more of this during the combat chapter later in the series. Cool doesn't come up very frequently in social checks, but if it does, extra advantage could be that maybe the player gains some extra benefit from the NPCs, while threat could unintentionally reveal some information to NPCs. Coordination is your character's ability to balance on unstable surfaces, crawl through tight spaces, escape restraints, or even landing on your feet without getting hurt, or reducing damage while falling from a high place. Extra successes could mean that you go farther distance when you crawl through a tight space, or maybe you reduce more damage when you fall from a high place. That rhymed. Advantage could be used to heal strain, whereas if you rolled a 2, it could be used to gain a free maneuver. Oppositely, threat could make you lose your free maneuver. Triumph could allow the player to block the enemy's path, while despair could cause them to get caught or stuck, or maybe even take a critical injury.
Deception is when you're trying to deceive another character.
Maybe you're trying to mislead the value of an item you're trying to sell, or maybe you're trying to use sly cunning to distract an opponent, even if it's physical confrontation. Or maybe while being chased you want to lead a false trail, or pretend to seduce someone that your character is not attracted to. Difficulty for deception will normally be set by the target's discipline in an opposed check, but if you're trying to deceive a group, then difficulty could be determined by the size of the group and/or their disposition towards the player. Extra success could mean that the deception is not realized for longer, extending support in the future scenes. Advantage could increase the value of any goods obtained from the lie, while threat could possibly reveal just part of the lie to the enemy. Triumph could make the player trustworthy to that NPC, while despair could cause the NPC to spread the news of your untrustworthiness throughout the town. Discipline is a character's mental willpower and fortitude. How well can you maintain your inner composure? Discipline is used to counter leadership, coercion, and deception checks. Force powers like influence can use discipline opposed versus the target's discipline. It is also rolled when doing a fear check to see if your character can resist succumbing to their fear. Maybe the character is under heavy blaster fire and needs to roll to make sure they can still act normally. Most of the time, this is used to oppose other people's checks, but when it does come up, extra success could mean that you downgrade the difficulty of your next check. Advantage could give insight into the situation, while threat could add strain to the player. Triumph could give boost die to fellow party members during the next round, while despairs could mean that the player is completely overwhelmed and is only able to take one maneuver or action, at least until they snap out of it. Leadership is a character's ability to lead and inspire others. Maybe the player wants to sway a crowd to take action, or to help snap a party member out of fear following a failed fear check. Difficulty can be based on the people being influenced, taking consideration on their intelligence, their professionalism, and the complexity of what you're trying to get them to do. If you're trying to sway somebody to do something that isn't in their best interest, or could put them in danger, then it could also be an opposed check against their discipline. Extra success could extend support through multiple scenes. Advantage could mean that you affect other bystanders to also pitch in and help, while threat could decrease the efficiency, causing this task to take longer. Triumph could make the NPC a recurring ally, while despair could cause them to rally against the player or refuse future orders. Mechanics represents a player's ability to build, analyze, or repair anything from droids to ships to blasters and gear. Maybe a blaster is damaged and you need to fix it. Maybe you're trying to run a diagnostic sweep on a ship to identify what repairs are needed. Maybe you need to roll mechanics before beginning a repair job to know what tools or supplies might be needed. Maybe you want to mod gear or attachments. Or maybe the character wants to build a new device from spare parts. At the GM's discretion, mechanics checks might be impossible without the proper tools for the job. The difficulty of repairing damaged gear like a blaster is based on the damage sustained. Minor damage is easy, moderate is average, and major damage is hard to fix, with each of those repairs costing credits equal to a percentage of the item's listed value. For other mechanics checks, difficulty can be determined by the complexity of the task. Additional success could reduce the amount of time needed to complete the task. Advantage could maybe grant boost die when using the item, while threat could give a setback to the item until it's fully repaired. Triumph could give the item a cool one-time special ability, such as a massive speed boost on a speeder, or maybe a super powerful blast shot on a blaster rifle. Despair could also be used to inflict harm on the item or cause other malfunctions. Hey, if this video is helpful so far, please do me a favor and blast the like button. It took a lot of work to get all this information together, and while you're down there, consider subscribing if you want to see more of this series. Medicine checks are used to treat and heal injuries. They cover things like applying routine first aid with the med pack, mixing, applying, or treating poison, identifying symptoms and creating treatment, and even healing critical injuries. I'll be going more into detail on healing damage and critical injuries later in the series, but for other medicine-related checks like diagnosing illnesses or handling unusual medical situations, the GM will just set the difficulty based on how complex the task is. One important distinction to make for droids, though, is that droids are healed using mechanics, not medicine. Every success that you roll could be used to heal another wound. Advantage could be used to heal strain. Threat could be used to inflict strain. Triumph could be used to maybe heal a critical injury, while Despair could cause a much larger amount of strain on the player. Negotiation is the ability to negotiate, finding a happy compromise where both parties can benefit or be satisfied in a deal or agreement. If a player wants to purchase or sell goods or services, or create a treaty between two factions, or even track down where to go to find rare items to purchase, then you would roll negotiation. If you're trying to come to an agreement with another person, then the difficulty would be determined by the other person's negotiation or cool in an opposed check. For finding items to buy, the difficulty is based on the item's rarity. I'll throw a table on screen with those difficulties now, but I'm going to go more in depth on buying and selling items again later in the series. You can find a link to the full series in the description. Additional success could mean that you bring down the cost of an item or that you're able to sell an item for more. Advantage could be used to gain additional boons from the target, while threat could be used to make the item that you're trying to sell less valuable, or maybe make the item you're trying to buy more expensive. A triumph could turn the NPC into a recurring regular vendor that the players trust and use that maybe has rare items that the players are looking for from time to time. Despairs, on the other hand, could completely sabotage the player's goals during the interaction. Perception is going to be how well your character is able to use their 5 senses to actively or passively notice information. You would roll perception to maybe notice a trap or ambush before it happens, or maybe to look for a secret lever hidden in an office. Perception could be the ability to notice subtle clues in overheard conversations, or a scent of explosive materials, or to notice a drug introduced into your beverage. Additional success could mean additional details, while advantage could mean that you spot something else that you weren't initially looking for. Threat could be used to conceal a vital detail. Triumph could be maybe used to notice something that's really big and helpful that could grant boost die to future checks relating to it. While Despair could be used to make the player learn completely wrong information about their surroundings or the target. Next is piloting, which is split into planetary piloting and space piloting. Planetary piloting is the ability to pilot smaller craft designed to stay within the planet, such as speeder bikes or air speeders. It doesn't matter if it rolls, flies, floats, walks, or glides. If it was designed for planetary use, this is the skill you use. Under normal traffic and weather conditions, the players should never have to roll difficulty. Instead, you would roll planetary piloting when you're in a high-speed chase, or a race, or traveling through treacherous weather conditions, or using a failing vehicle, or using a type of vehicle that you're less than familiar with, or if any other complications are present. Space piloting is for starships and spacecraft that are designed to traverse through the cold dark of space, or through the timey-wimey... wrong blue space tunnel. Or to travel through the galaxy through hyperspace. Again, this should not be rolled under normal conditions, but rather in situations like racing or chasing spacecraft, flying through asteroid belts or thick sandstorms, or gaining an optimal position in the space battle. For both planetary vehicles and starships, the difficulty of the check could be determined by the particular maneuver, the speed, the weather conditions, or any failures the vehicle may have. If you are in ship combat, there are specific difficulty rules found in a table, as well as specific rules for traveling through treacherous obstacles like nebulae or asteroid belts or a blizzard or sandstorm. The quick explanation is that difficulty is determined by your speed that you're currently going, and the ship's silhouette divided by 2 rounded up. The larger number of those 2 is how many purple dice you grab. The smaller number is how many you will upgrade to red. For both piloting skills, extra success could mean more insights into the situation. Advantage could maybe reveal a vulnerability in an enemy's vehicle. This could translate to boost die in later checks. Multiple threat could mean that an enemy gains boost when they're attacking you, representing some sort of failure in your ship's systems. Triumph could be used to let the pilot take an additional free maneuver, while Despair could cause damage to your ship's systems. Resilience is a character's ability to carry on through difficult physical conditions like sleep deprivation, dehydration, or malnutrition, or maybe to fight off the effects of a toxin, or carry on through prolonged exposure to hostile environments like severe heat or cold, or toxic pollution. Difficulty again will range based on the conditions, so staying awake for 24 hours might be easy, while it would be much more difficult to march through a blizzard on Hoth. Extra success could mean that the player is more resilient to whatever the environment is for a longer duration. Advantage could find some way to reduce the difficulty of future checks, whereas threat could inflict setback on future checks. Triumph could be used to recover a good chunk of strain, while despair could cause a critical injury or wounds. Skulduggery encompasses a wide range of skills that are used to perform covert or criminal action. These skills can be for picking locks, picking pockets, avoiding security systems, disguising oneself for others, setting traps, analyzing and identifying the most vulnerable parts of a security system, and other underhanded actions. Skulduggery is often opposed by a target's perception, but when another character is not directly involved, the difficulty should be based on the complexity and quality of the object being overcome. Extra success could give the player more insight into the situation, making future checks easier. Advantage could be used to identify maybe another potential target or find additional items. Threats could be used to put the player in danger. Triumph could mean that the stolen item is far more valuable than the players expected or thought, while Despair could cause the player to unknowingly leave some evidence behind, tracing them directly to the crime. Stealth is for you want to be the sneaky, trying to hide from all of an enemy's senses, tailing an enemy without being spotted, or trying to hide objects or people from the attentions of others using concealment or misdirection. Even wilderness camouflage are just some of the actions that would be covered with stealth check. Difficulty will typically be determined through an opposed check using the enemy's perception, whether they are actively looking or passively noticing. Sometimes you may also have some gear that can also affect difficulty or add boost die. Extra success could be used to aid an ally that's following you. Advantage could reduce the amount of time it takes to perform the action, while threat could bring unforeseen obstacles or danger that the player now has to try to figure out how to get around. Triumph could mean that the player has found a way to distract the NPC for the remainder of the encounter or scene. Or Despair again could cause the players to unknowingly leave behind evidence of their tampering or infiltration. Streetwise is a skill that represents the instinct and understanding that comes from living in the less than savory places of the galaxy. Streetwise is used in the moments such as approaching criminals or underworld elements without coming across as a threat, searching for illegal goods, or even the ability to pick up on the subtle clues of language and attitudes of those who operate outside the law. Difficulty just depends on what the player is trying to do and its complexity. It may be an easy check to approach some Slimo thug in a cantina without spooking him, while it could be much harder to try and find or communicate with a hardened mob boss. When looking for illegal items, difficulty is based on rarity. I'll throw some info on screen, but again, we're going to cover this more in depth later. Extra success could reduce the amount of time needed to gain the information, item, or audience. Advantage could maybe reveal additional rumors or grant favor with an individual, while threat could give minor falsehoods in the information or even offend the other individual. Triumph could give the players a semi-permanent contact on the streets who they can have a reasonable amount of trust with, while Despair could be used to make the players not so popular on the streets of that area. Survival is going to be how well your player can navigate, survive, and thrive in the wilderness. Looking for safe food or water in the wild, reading weather patterns and preparing, looking at the sky for the time of day or night, picking up on and following an animal or enemy's tracks in the ground, taming wild animals. These are just some of the things that this skill could encompass. Difficulty will be based on the severity of the environment the character is in, their biocompatibility with the planet, and the weather conditions, and even basic tools on hand or not on hand. Extra success could be used to stockpile goods or assist allies. Advantage could be used to gain some insight, making some future survival checks easier. Threat could represent the player using some of their limited resources. Triumph could mean that a tamed animal becomes a trusted companion. Or maybe the player learns a vital clue about whoever it is that they're tracking. Despair could be used to gain some wounds or even a critical injury or a high level of strain. And the last of the general skills is Vigilance, which is a character's mental capability to be constantly prepared for whatever unexpected dangers life may throw at them. Vigilance is used for initiative when the party is not expecting confrontation. It can also be used to determine if a character was detail-oriented enough to have packed that small piece of gear needed for this moment. Initiative doesn't have difficulty, but outside of that, difficulty for Vigilance should be determined by the likelihood of the incident to occur. For example, reacting to a trap you set off might be a bit more expected in an old temple than something like a groundquake. Outside of initiative, extra success could mean that the player was well prepared and they have something in their inventory, a small piece of gear that helps with their current situation. Advantage could mean that maybe the player already has an escape route planned out, while threat could mean that key information was missed. If a triumph was rolled during initiative, then maybe the player gets an extra free maneuver during the first round of combat, while despair could mean that they're limited to only one maneuver during that first round. We'll touch more on initiative and combat stuff when we get to the combat chapter, but with that being said, let's get into the combat skills. I'm not going to be covering role interpretation here because again, that's all kind of stuff that falls into the combat chapter later in the series. So combat skills will fall into two unofficial categories, ranged and not ranged. Let's start with ranged first. Ranged light is going to be your character's ability to use one-handed weapons, such as blaster pistols, grenades, bolas, or throwing spears. Ranged heavy is your ability to use two-handed weapons, like blaster rifles or snipers. And gunnery is going to be for ranged weapons that require a mount, such as a heavy repeating blaster or ship's weaponry. These are especially great at blasting the like button. Brawl is for hand-to-hand combat, martial arts, incapacitating an enemy without killing them, or using weapons like brass knuckles and shot gloves. Melee is going to be for weapons like swords, daggers, knives, axes, and other similar weapons. This will also include improvised weapons like chairs or table legs for when that guy at the cantina really just makes you angry. And then we have lightsaber, which is specifically used when wielding a lightsaber. Any weapon you plan to use from the books will have a skill tag letting you know which skill is required. Difficulty is based on a few factors such as range, but again, we're going to cover all of that later in the series. Our last category is knowledge skills. These are going to be based on your character's intelligence. These are for those moments where your player asks, "Hey, what do I know about insert topic here?" But before we jump into that, I do want to clarify that the intellect-based skills, such as astrogation, medicine, and mechanics, they may seem like they partially fit under the knowledge skill umbrella. The reason that they don't is that they also involve an active component, like setting a ship's coordinates and plotting the jump into hyperspace. That results in a physical action, the ship jumping, and a result, the ship arriving. Can it be a fine line? Yeah. Would I have done it a little differently and a little less confusingly myself? Probably. Thankfully, GMs can just decide however they want to handle it. Core worlds is how much you know about the core worlds of the galaxy, from culture to civilizations. This skill can be used to know the polite way to interact with someone as opposed to what's offensive, picking up on an accent to understand the NPC's origin, where they're from, knowing what planets have a particular resource or critical supply, or knowing what markets are best to buy or sell, and even knowing which worlds where some goods may be illegal. The Outer Rim skill is going to work exactly the same way as the core world skill, just for the Outer Rim instead of the core worlds. There's no skills for in between the core and the outer worlds, so it's up to the GM to decide if the mid-rim worlds fall on either side. I will typically view deep core, core, and inner rim as core worlds, and then the expansion, mid-rim, and outer rim as the outer rim checks. Lore is going to be how well you know legends and stories and the history associated with the galaxy. This is used when deciphering ancient pieces of writing, or understanding its context, or to know the exploits of an ancient hero, or identifying an artifact that the players find. Underworld is going to be how much a player knows about the underworld, which worlds nearby are the best for illegal activities, knowing what are the best methods for committing a crime, or knowledge of local crime organizations. Just as a reminder, knowledge Underworld governs specific facts and information involving criminals and underworld organizations. Streetwise is for actually using that information and operating within the criminal environment. Xenology is going to be how well a player knows a species or life form and their motivations, their biological origins and philosophies. This skill could be used if the player first encounters a member of an unfamiliar race, to identify how to interact with them socially, or knowing a species' vulnerability, or knowing what environmental conditions or food a guest of another species would prefer. Warfare is a skill that was introduced in Age of Rebellion, and this covers a character's knowledge on conflict, both on the ground and in space, or the history of conflicts. This skill could come into play when a player wants to remember an old strategy used in a previous battle or war, or maybe the player wants to know what weapon might be best for the situation. And finally, we have education, which is kind of the catch-all for knowledge. If it's not covered by another knowledge skill specifically, then you could use education. Education will also represent how well one is educated in subjects like math, basic science, and history. This skill can be used when knowing how to proceed with government authority or employ basic scientific knowledge in an analysis. Difficulty of knowledge checks will depend on various factors, including the player's experience of that specific topic, the complexity or rarity of the information, or how hard it would be to obtain. Extra success could mean an extra vital piece of information is known, while advantage could be a minor additional piece of information. Threat could mean that some small part of the vital information is missing. Triumph could be used to gain information that's very directly beneficial concerning the subject, while despair could be used to fill that information with misinformation and falsehoods. Knowledge checks are also really great for GMs to prompt their players to roll, especially if they've stalled and are stuck and you need the plot to move along. By making them earn the hint with a knowledge check, it still feels earned because the character figured it out even if the player couldn't. Now, I promised at the beginning of the video I had a super secret tip for you guys to help take your role-playing to the next level. It's actually super simple, and once you learn it, it'll take you out of that game mindset and put you into the storytelling and role-playing mindset. And that piece of advice is, do not ask your GM to roll a skill. Do not say, can I roll a stealth here? Or can I make a perception check? This is thinking in terms of your character sheet instead of thinking in terms of what your character is actually thinking. Instead, tell the GM what you want to do. Hey, can I try to get across the room and make it all the way to that box of thermal detonators without alerting any of the stormtroopers? To which the GM could then respond, yeah, sure, give me a hard stealth check. Or maybe you can say, hey, I look around, is there anything valuable here or anything out of place? To which the GM could respond, yeah, sure, give me an average perception check, but add a setback die because there's some dim lighting in the room. When playing a TTRPG, frame what you want to do in the story. Let that translate to the GM telling you to roll the skill, not the other way around where you try to infuse the skills on your paper into the story. GMs, if you have new players, odds are that they're making skill requests, as I like to call them. I would just encourage you to lightly encourage them to reframe their question as what their character is trying to do in the narrative. I hope this video was informative. If you have any questions, you can drop them down in the comments below. I do my best to answer all of them. Next in the series, we're going to be going into character creation. I'm going to have a video up on screen for that. And if you want to see Star Wars RPG in action, you can check out episode 1 of our actual play also on screen. Huge thanks to the Patreon supporters for all that you do. Your support is so appreciated. Thank you to everybody for watching. I'll see you guys in the next video, but until then, and as always, may the Force be with you.